Today's episode of Shockwaves is sponsored by Shudder, the premium streaming video service devoted to horror, thrillers, and suspense. Backed by AMC Networks, Shudder has a growing and dynamic selection of thrilling premieres, originals, and exclusives, including pregnancy horror comedy Prevenge, the Ring vs. the Grudge franchise mashup Sadako vs. Kayako, and We Are the Flesh. This week's Shudder highlight is Jordskot, a 10-episode folk horror series declared by Dread Central, the kind of mystery show you wish were made more often. When Eva, a policewoman, returns to her hometown several years after her daughter's disappearance, she quickly begins investigating a new wave of vanishing children. As her search draws her deep into the forest, she realizes there are supernatural secrets in the town, and if she exposes them, it could make someone or something very angry. Stream the series called A Borgian and Stranger Things mashup by the Toronto Star now exclusively on Shudder. Shudder is available for the web, iOS, Android, Chromecast, Apple TV, and Roku for $4.99 a month or $49.99 with an annual membership. But Shockwaves listeners get a free month by entering the promo code SHOCK at checkout. Go to Shudder.com today and find the best collection of horror available to stream anywhere.
Thank you guys so much for coming
Thank
to
you
the
so
live
much.
Shockwaves.
This is a good crowd, guys.
Yeah, this is amazing.
Good crowd.
Oh, look at this. You have an outline.
I do have an outline because I'm prepared.
I have pages
Elric
of
and I
notes.
never prepare.
I'm
We're
prepared.
getting transparency into the Shockwaves process.
Yeah, Ryan and I are
What's
like
this?
meticulous notes, and they just kind of show up. And look at
Yeah,
their
I just
phones.
realized without notes that I'm just lost and I'm
Elric,
rambling.
quit copying off me.
I'm not copying.
Copying off me.
All right.
You have nothing
Welcome
to
to
want.
episode 50. This is the 50th episode of Shockwaves.
1 year. 1 year.
1 year. Yeah, the birthday was last week, I believe. And also shout out to the dude who's cosplaying as our logo.
Oh, can he come up?
Can
Can you please stand up?
Come up here for a minute so we can
It's
take a
really,
picture.
it's genius.
And Rob, stand up so they can see the shirt.
Yeah.
Look at this. The shirt
So-
design. And the
Look, the shirt comes alive. This is so awesome.
Does this seem low?
Vincent.
Vincent.
This is amazing.
You rock, man. Thank you so much. Oh. Let's
Here
do
we
it.
go.
Let's do this.
Beer left for us?
So our listeners are getting the full photograph
We're
experience.
taking a picture on air.
Awesome. All right.
Our listeners are home and like, what are they doing?
What are they
This
doing?
is so boring already.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Every time they experiment, it sucks. You guys having a good Texas Frightmare experience? What's your favorite panel so far? The Thing?
I thought Bates Motel was pretty spectacular,
Bates
Ryan.
Motel?
Udo here
About
gave me a
Fright-
back rub
Fright
this
Night?
morning.
Friday 5. Yay.
Seriously, I was doing the Puppet Master panel, and Udo
Yeah,
here
as
comes
an
up behind me.
objective
As-
listener, the Puppet Master was pretty spectacular.
well, thank you.
Udo was in
Getting
top
handsy.
form.
He was,
Yeah.
he was a live wire, including the frequent rubbing of my shoulders and back
There was
during
also
the panel.
The really
Little distracting.
the really amazing thing about the Puppet Master panel was so they're talking about the reboot or this new Puppet Master, which looks very fun. And Udo is sort of talking like, we made this new Puppet Master and there was only one, and then I never realized that there were 2, 3, 4, 5. They were all made just for money. And Charles Band's just sitting right over here. And somehow Charles Band, of all people, is balking at the idea that he did something just for money. He's like, what? I'm like, that's literally what you're known for.
But then he called Udo out on it later, and he was like, apparently I
Yeah.
just did them for money. Like,
And
it
I'm like-
works somehow.
I'm like, bud, no one's
go
mad
Charlie.
at you. We just know you're like a top-level huckster.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, well, he's reselling the that box set, the Empire box set that's like got
It's
DVD,
here?
Blu-rays. Yeah, it is.
Here,
I want it.
$250.
But it's got stuff that's already exists
Like a
from
champion
Screen
at
Factory.
making money.
Hey, by the way, we've got Sam Zimmerman in the house.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sam from Shudder. Shudder subscribers out there, let's see. Show of hands.
awesome.
There we
Thank
go.
you.
This
Look
is
at that.
so rad.
Love it. This is
You
great.
all get a year
I hope you're
free
enjoying
for
it.
coming to this podcast. You just have to hashtag SamZ. Guaranteed.
I did not say that.
All right, so do we want to dive right in with our topic?
Did we
got a
introduce
lot.
ourselves?
I think
Do you
we
guys
should
know who
probably
we are?
intro.
Oh,
Anybody
yeah, let's
here
just for
have
the
no idea what Shockwave
Yeah,
is.
has anybody never heard of Shockwaves before?
Oh, this guy.
Yeah.
This
Sir,
guy,
this
that
guy.
guy,
Two or three.
this
He
guy.
He thought it was a Ken
Okay.
Wiederhorn panel.
Show hands.
And the worst day of his life. Sorry, man.
He was like, I thought we were celebrating the original Nazi
The
zombies.
original Nazis on
Well,
ships.
Rebecca, why don't you explain what Shockwaves is?
So we are a podcast. It originally started as Killer POV 3 years ago with Geek Nation. And it was, how many? Four now. Well, 3 years with Geek Nation, one more with Blumhouse. So my math is flawless, guys.
Yeah, all right.
And that one was with Rob, Elric, and I. And at the same time, Ryan had another show on the same network, Geek Nation.
Yep, called the Bloodcast, and I did it. I took over from somebody else, and they didn't really walk me through how to do a podcast. So I was on my own for a little while. So I did about 10 episodes by myself, just interviewing people. And then I did one episode solely by myself, just talking into empty space. So that was a fun experimental episode. And then I brought on Clark Wolf, who used to write for Collider and Nerdist, and now she's part of Collider Nightmares, the YouTube show. And we did, I think, about 25 episodes together. And then I left for Blumhouse. I went to go take a job at Blumhouse. And then along the way, there was internal talk about, once we got Blumhouse.com going, it was like, well, let's get a podcast going. And I was like, well, look, guys, there's a great podcast out there called Killer POV. We should just bring the gang over and give them the free reign to do whatever they want. So this podcast was born, and they recorded regularly across the hall from my office. So I got really jealous hearing them at the end of the night recording their podcast and laughing. I was kind of like the kid on the outside of the playground watching all the kids
You'd
like hang
pop
from
in
the
and you'd be like, okay, guys, I guess
I
we're
wanna
going to start
talk
now.
about-
He was a
can I
guest
say-
star from
Hey,
the
by the
start.
way, can I tell you? And also, when I listen too, and so when I'd be driving to work, I'd hear like Elric
Fright Night
talking
2 is
about
better than Fright Night 1. Am
yeah,
I
this,
right?
This fucking bullshit
Three
about
people
Fright
with
Night
me.
2.
It's a
and I'm
dangerous
just like
room for that.
yelling at myself in LA traffic, going "Fuck you, Elric! Fuck you!"
We all
if I
feel
just
that
if I was
all the
only
time.
on Shockwaves.
Sam's
so,
got
yeah.
my back, right, Sam?
Well, at least you're able to do that because like I know all of you and I live in New York, so most of the time it's like I'm just on my way to work, like trying to interject and tell you're all a bunch of idiots.
from the East Coast.
I've never had a podcast because I'm only good at guest spots. So.
But Sam and I go way back to like our Fangoria
Yes.
days. Like Sam and I have been in the trenches together for literally like over a decade now. So
Yeah.
we go way back. And that was both started out at Fangoria, and then I went to Blumhouse, and Sam went to Shudder.
Yeah.
So,
So,
yeah.
now we're as Elric likes to call it, a well-oiled Voltron.
Yes.
That loves to tackle horror, and if any of us fall out for an episode, the episodes are not as strong
then
because
we get
we really
complaints, like-
need to lock together
Yeah.
to form
Yeah,
this.
whoever's missing, somebody will tweet us going, that person was the engine of your
Yeah.
show. Your show sucks without them. Every one of us has had
Every
that
one of
comment
us has
at some
that.
point.
Yeah.
And
then
it's
like-
nice for a moment, but fuck that. You know, we do our best.
Yeah. So that's Shockwaves.
Yes.
And we've tried a different. Originally it was going to be like it was like a first segment just talking about movies. Second segment, second half of the show being an interview, and then we tried a bunch of different formats, and we were trying to figure it out. We did 2 episodes a week instead of 1, and then we were like, no, fuck that. We're going to do 1 episode a week and really throw our all into a nice 2-hour podcast. And then sometimes we do just. Retrospective things. We would just look back at, we'll just find a topic that we just want to riff on, and we won't have a guest at all. But you guys and the feedback you give us inform us about how the show should go sometimes. Sometimes we find that you guys don't like the interview segments and you just like to hear us ramble.
Why?
Yeah.
But then we get complaints about, this is just like 4 people who talk about themselves for an
Yeah,
hour.
that was one
That was one guy.
that was one guy.
Do you like living?
What does that even mean?
Yeah.
Anyway.
That was good.
That joke
Sorry.
might be too specific.
No,
Yeah.
there was a Facebook comment thread that was going on. Somebody didn't particularly care for us talking about our experiences in horror.
Who has never listened to a podcast before.
Yeah, I've never listened to a
that's what it
podcast.
is.
And then someone came in and chimed in and defended us, and this guy responded, "Do you like living?" We're like, oh shit.
It was way extra.
We're not going to say who it is, but since then he's written us 4 emails asking if he could come on the show. So, who's laughing now?
All insulting, too.
Yeah. Exactly.
You guys are terrible, but I'll come on if you still want to have me. All right.
Yeah. So thanks for having us back, because you guys did Killer POV here.
A couple years ago. We did it twice, yeah.
Yeah.
I've
2
never
years in a
done it.
row we did.
Did anyone come to any of the previous things we did here?
DJ Big Red
We
was
brought
there.
AJ Bowen one time.
Yeah. And of course Dustin was there.
Yeah, of
So
course.
Yep.
yeah.
So
Very
what are we talking about today, Ryan?
All right.
That's we're going to give you a taste of the
I don't know
show.
what the hell
Yes.
we're doing.
Because obviously we're not going to do an interview, and we don't have 2 hours to do that. But we wanted to riff on a topic,
Yeah,
and make it fun and feel interactive.
Yeah, this
so.
episode's called Overlooked and Unloved Films of the 90s.
Yeah.
And this all came about because we, like I was telling somebody else, one of these days we're just going to publish our text chain because it's pretty insane. Sometimes it's just us arguing over one another, trying to figure out like the theme of the show. And we originally
they texted all hours of night, like
all hours in the night,
like 12:30,
2:30 in the morning. It's like Becca just going,
from
"Hey,
these guys, hey guys, I just watched blank. Here's what I thought about it," and it's continuous.
And then there will come a mysterious text from me that says, "Can't we do this via email?"
Or hey guys, it's Sunday.
It's
Yeah.
Sunday."
And
That
then
is
we
an
stop-
actual text because I'm like, it's fucking Sunday,
And then
guys.
we'll
Horror doesn't
Alone.
stop for weekends.
But then we stopped texting Rob for about 12 hours, but then we start back up. Really
Oh yeah.
quickly.
We took it. We went
We'll
to
go
another
offline.
chain.
Yeah, we'll start another chain, and
so
then we come back.
The 90s we landed on just simply because the 80s are so. I mean, like when you talk about overlooked and unloved films, I just felt like if we dove into the 80s, I'd be like,
There's like no more from the 80s.
yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like there
Nothing's
would be
overlooked
like
from the 80s
TerrorVision. Everybody
anymore.
like, yeah, I fucking love TerrorVision. And it's like, oh, okay, great. So what about the 90s? Because
Well-
yeah, go ahead.
Plus, the 90s, they get a bad rap. Like, everybody, you look at... I've heard the 80s called the silver age of horror so many times. If we say that the golden age was like all of the Universal monsters of the 30s, that the silver age was the 80s, because that's when we had Freddy and Mike Myers and Jason and all these other major icons pop out. And then we go to the 90s, and everybody has talked about how there was this giant lull in horror.
Yeah, and I think that's a generational thing
I do too.
because I think it's a generational thing because there's a lot of younger horror fans who look upon the 90s very fondly because it gave them the post-Scream slasher boom, It gave them In the Mouth of Madness. It gave them Candyman, Jacob's Ladder, Event Horizon. Yes, Event Horizon is an amazing
But
film.
even that
Thank you,
was
Stevie.
It gave us
Incredibly.
Brain Scan.
It
Yeah,
gave us
Brain
Brain
Scan.
Scan. And it also tried to kill off a lot of the old guard, It tried to kill off Freddy and Jason. Leatherface just did whatever Leatherface does. And they still can't figure that out.
But I think that a lot of these films didn't get discovered and appreciated until a little bit after their time, because even if we talk about Event Horizon, total bomb. I mean, it was completely unappreciated when it came out. They didn't even market it as a horror film. They marketed it as a sci-fi film, because I went to see that thing with my mom, and then the flashback scene happens, and Mom's like, "Is that man eating himself?" And yeah.
what else have you seen with your mom? I can have
Hell
this
yeah,
discussion
Mom.
too. What else have you seen
And
with
it
your mom
rules.
that's like kind of weird?
Oh my God, my mom loves horror films, so she's seen all of the Blumhouse canon. So
Yeah, but that's not weird though. We make kind of just non.
she likes Phantoms.
But to play
Oh,
devil's,
that's fucking weird.
I want to play devil's advocate here for a second because the '90s are a bit shit. You just listed all the movies that are actually good from this period, and I was looking through it. There's some I love, but also that they're so chastised. Like we were just in here a few minutes ago talking about Friday 5, which is outrageous. The sex scenes are incredible. The death scenes are incredible, and still not. It's not a great film by any chance. Some people love it. Some people hate it. But
It's a bit
look
shit,
at-
Elric.
Yeah, but look at I Know What You Did. No, but look at I Know What You Did Last Summer and all these movies.
I Know What You Did Last
so-
Summer is fucking awesome.
No,
Yeah.
oh no, they're so.
It is
shady.
awesome.
Oh, no. All right, listen.
Yeah. All
I
right.
know what you did last summer.
Chase.
Not great, but the chase is a legit chase. Great,
Sure.
great scene.
I think that a lot of it was also
Oh,
reflecting kind of the culture of the time, because if you think about the 90s in general, we
Yes,
were all
we were
very
all teens.
resentful. We all hated everything.
We all wanted to be
Everyone
prom
was
queen.
a narc, and we hated everybody.
We
and that
were a
was
bit
it.
shit. We are the problem.
the
Everything
thing-
was a bit shit in
here's
the
the
90s.
thing.
I'm sorry. I
I'm
was a
gonna
kid
go
then. I know.
listen to, I'm gonna go
What's-
read liner
what's the
notes
thing
to
she
Melancholy
wins?
and the Infinite Sadness.
And I
that's
know what
it.
you did last summer.
She gets like the Sarah Michelle
Miss-
Gellar gets like the Miss.
It's like the Miss Town
Miss,
or whatever.
Miss Town.
Miss Town.
Miss Fisherman
County.
thing.
I want to be Miss Town.
But no, look, the 90s gave us a glut of horror films because of the
Yes.
direct-to-video market. You know, there was
And
a lot of
great
stuff
films in there.
I am going to argue. So I always hear from fans and see, we even have an article on the Blumhouse website about 1986 being the greatest year of horror, just because there was so much coming out during that time. I could make a defense for 1999, which I will later in this podcast. But there was a ton of horror films that came out in 1999 that when I was actually researching this, I was like, wow, that was a really good year. Now, some of them didn't hit till later.
Yeah, that's because the 90s decided to, like, get good.
Yeah, right at the end, they were like, we should do something,
They were like,
guys.
oh, we need to wrap up this decade. Yeah, and it was also, I mean, like, I think just personally for me, it's kind of when I came online as a horror fan. You know, like the 80s, I just kind of had to go with what my folks introduced me to. Like, I wasn't able to get out and go. I mean, like, the rules were a little loose, fast and loose in terms of what I was able to see and what not to see. But it wasn't until the 90s when I finally cut loose from home, cut loose from high school, moved to New York City, and then just started getting everything from Kim's Video. You know, that's when I got to see a lot of the nasty stuff. But then I was also a little bit more aware of what was coming out in the 90s. So it was just like, it's an interesting time. And when I look back at it, I'm like, yeah, it wasn't really all that bad. There's some good stuff, and I have a list of things that I would love to talk about, and you guys too. Hopefully, Rob, you have some stuff.
I've just decided on the 3.
Oh, shit.
Because I don't read the text chain, so swinging it.
We've
No
been
idea what
talking
we're
about
doing.
this for days.
That well-oiled machine that we talked about. So, anyways, yeah, there was the 90s. Let's get into it. Elric, we
Kick us off,
chose.
Elric.
What was the assignment?
Huh?
The assignment
The assignment was
three
to pick
each.
3 films each that we consider overlooked and unloved. So hopefully we'll be able to give you a few films that maybe you've never heard about, or we'll be able to lend some new insight or perspective on films that you ordinarily thought were shit. So
A bit shit. I said I didn't go all the way with shit. I said a bit shit.
A bit shit.
And
Is
a
that
Just a
term?
bit.
game of inches. All right. Okay, only one film made
Well,
me go to university and study criminology, and that was Eric Red's Body Bags. True
Yes.
story.
No, Body Parts.
Body parts.
Body parts.
Sorry,
Body
not body
parts.
bags. My bad. I'm one beer in. I'm such a lightweight now.
Body parts.
Which is actually true. It's the only film I watched. This film at about 14, 15, and I literally decided in that moment, I want to be a criminal psychologist because look at how interesting his life is. He has limbs from a serial killer attached to his body, but he maintains his job. He plays basketball. There's something about this movie. He takes in fine art and he still drinks at a bar. There's something about this movie that really spoke to me at a certain age. Since meeting Eric Red, I kind of maybe cooled on the movie a little. He's strange character, great writer though, and he is dark. Like his films, the one thing they all have, The Hitcher, you guys, Near Dark, these are some of the films he's written. This film is, for who's not heard of this movie? It's not Body Bags. It's Body Parts. Okay.
I've
Body
never
Parts
seen it.
from 1991.
Yeah. Okay, so it's basically a criminal psychologist gets in a bad car accident where he loses his arm, and they give him the arm of a serial killer, and he slowly finds out he doesn't realize it's a serial killer's arm. Through the process of the movie, he starts to figure out that different limbs have been given to different people, and they all have these weird kind of reflexes coming back. So one happens to be playing basketball, but his legs kind of spaz out because they're serial killer legs. And that's what they do. It's super weird. I can't remember. No one has the head.
It's Brad. No.
Brad Dourif is the artist.
Brad Dourif has the other arm because
Yes.
he's a painter, so he's like painting the darkest,
Yeah.
weirdest shit. And then the head is somewhere else.
Towards the
and
end of the movie, you get a great reveal where the head's still around. So, and there's a scene in this movie where the original head and all sorts of kind of weird part of his body is trying to get his parts back, and he changed that. Should I go there? Should I give you?
No. So it's
leave you
interesting.
hanging.
Yeah. No, you don't have to leave it hanging. Body Parts is actually on my list too, and I'll adjust to add, but it's number 1 on my list. But what's interesting is that
Oh,
Voltron. Body Parts spends the first hour of the movie dealing with the paranoia of what's his name, Jeff Fahey.
Jeff Fahey.
It's
He's really
Jeff
good in that.
Fahey,
It's his best
and
role.
it's really just about him coping with his family, coping with this body part that is acting spasmodic, and then talking to the other people who all have these other body parts. And it's not until the final act of the film that someone starts to retrieve these body parts. So it starts to become like an action horror movie.
It's like a PTSD trauma film. Like
it
could be real griefy, but it delivers. It gives you that. And this is something that I think is a bit of a holdover from the 80s. Is the fantastic is still in this movie, and the further we go into the 90s, the more we lose that. When we get to Scream, post Scream, I think that's what I'm talking about when I say it's a bit shit. It's like I feel like a little imagination's been lost in that period of filmmaking, and it becomes a lot more about the kind of referential, which is fun, but there's steam.
Well, there's something Hitchcockian about the movie. You know, it's more of a quiet thriller than it is a horror film, more of a psychological thriller, and it's not until. And it feels like a big studio note where they were like, "This is too boring. Can you just throw in a dude collecting his body parts again?" Because there's some big moments, you know, at the very end, especially with Brad Dourif. There's a moment when the guy reclaims his arm, and it just comes out like in all its gory glory. Like the arm was never fucking attached. And the guy just goes, "I'll take this back," and it's like, whoa!
There were temporary
stitching,
you know,
terrible
temporary stitches.
Yeah,
but if you haven't seen it, it's a really fun movie,
and also great use of theremin.
Oh, yeah.
There's a theremin throughout the entire score, and it's just super cool. And they rip off Reanimator with the opening credits sequence where it's all these body parts floating across the screen, and it's cool. It totally tanked.
Yeah,
totally tanked when it came out. Paramount put it out in '91, and I think I just read in Rue Morgue magazine that a town the state of Wisconsin pulled all of the ads for body parts because the Jeffrey Dahmer shit started going down.
Yeah. And he actually looks a little. He looks a little, Dahmerish, I think.
Who, Jeff E?
Yeah, he does a little bit. Yeah,
he does.
Yeah.
I don't see it.
Yeah.
Let's take a poll. Let's take a Dahmer poll.
He's got those beautiful blue eyes.
But I do have to say, even though I am not personally a fan of the movie, which is the point of today, is you're defending ones that you think may have been overlooked or kind of disregarded, I will say that does bring up one of the predominant tropes that we saw during the 1990s, which was the whole idea of technology and our own scientific advancements pushed too far. The whole kind of Lawnmower Man-esque idea, and Unborn of
also Jeff Fahey.
Also Jeff Fahey.
That's true.
The whole idea of we might be able to do this, but it could be wrong and evil. So
because there is a mad scientist element to the movie. The doctor who attached a limb to Jeff Fahey's body, she's a little unhinged, and she's got a greater purpose, and that's why she's kept the serial killer's head. But there's a great character actor who's also in it. The guy who plays the detective, he's the bad guy in Serpent and a Rainbow, but he is fantastic in this as well. So body parts.
We agreed. That's cool. Yeah. Good start. All right.
Nice. So I'm gonna go with 1996's Freeway.
Oh shit!
Oh. Yeah.
Well, diving right in without a horror film. Good job.
That is totally a fucking horror film, and now it's
really
on.
It's on the bubble.
It's called Texas Frightmare, right?
Oh my god!
Is Freeway 2 Confessions of a Trick Baby?
Confessions of a Trick Baby.
I couldn't remember which one had the subtitle.
I never thought a movie that I saw at Blockbuster all the time when I worked at Blockbuster would come up as much as it does when I'm friends with you, because this movie comes up all the fucking time.
Becca,
you just text me and go,
You've
Freeway.
been talking about Freeway for the 10 years I've known you.
For a long time, because I am passionate about this movie. Yeah, it's big. It's Little Red Riding Hood, but Freeway for me is somehow this director who hadn't done that much. His name was Matthew Bright. The only thing that he'd really done that became known was Forbidden Zone, which is all types of batshit crazy at 1980. So a decade and a half later, he convinces these A-list actors like Kiefer Sutherland and Reese Witherspoon and Amanda Plummer and Brooke Shields to make this seedy exploitation film where Reese Witherspoon plays an illiterate who runs away from home and ends up in the car of Kiefer Sutherland, who plays a serial killer.
Big Bad Wolf.
Yeah, Big Bad Wolf. And it's very much in the vein of Big Bad Wolf. Reese Witherspoon fights back, kicks his ass, and it kind of goes from there. But the whole thing... It's total exploitation. The whole thing, it is over the top and genius.
But glossy, 90s glossy exploitation.
But it's shot like a big blockbuster film with these major A-list stars, but then you're just watching it and you're like, this movie is fucking batshit crazy. Yeah. I don't even know what's going to happen. Kiefer Sutherland shows up with this neck collar on and having the shit kicked out of him, trying to get her again.
Were you the one that kept renting it from my local Blockbuster on 34th and 3rd in Manhattan?
Jesus.
It was always out.
Yeah.
Always.
So I have always been a fan of this movie. It's perverse. It's pedophilic in parts because Kiefer Sutherland is playing an older dude, and they play Reese Witherspoon is way too young. Like she's supposed to be like 14 in it, and she doesn't even look that young, but they play her as that young. And there's these weird scenes where Reese will just be on camera by herself, and she'll do these monologues to God. And she uses her actual Southern accent, but she overdoes it, so it feels like a caricature where she's like, "Hello, God," and it's just like, and then she'll go on for like 3 minutes with these diatribes to God, and they are just so bizarre. It's weird, and if you happen to enjoy Freeway, the same director, a couple years later, the same director-producer decided to see if lightning would strike twice. I don't even know how successful the first one was, but they decided to do it again with Freeway 2, Confessions of a Trick Baby, which is about a girls' juvenile delinquent facility where all of the girls are bulimic. 2 of them decide to escape, but then one realizes that the other one's a serial killer, and they're running cross-country together, but they end up, she keeps saying that they have to get to this convent that protected her when she was a kid, so they run to this convent in Mexico, which is run by Vincent Gallo in drag, but then they find out that the convent is actually promoting cannibalism, and there's more. I don't even have to go
like,
on.
which one are you advocating for?
I know.
Because part 2
All right, turn off the lights. We're watching this fucking thing. Fuck this
How many people have seen this movie? How many people have seen?
Number two.
Number
Right.
2,
These are
1
my-
and 2.
1 and 2,
These are my people.
1 you can find on DVD. 2 is only on VHS, but it is
2 lives in our hearts.
It is worth getting a VHS player just to see that craziness.
And a really quick tidbit about writer-director Matthew Bright, who did Freeway and Freeway 2. He also did the Ted Bundy movie from 2002.
Yeah.
But more importantly, his last movie, because it plays to him getting these all-star casts to do the most obscure things. He did a movie called Tiptoes in 2003.
Gary Oldman.
You ever heard of this? Go on YouTube immediately and look at the trailer for Tiptoes, because it stars Matthew McConaughey, whose brother is a dwarf, played by Gary Oldman.
Yeah.
And
this
it is
so Matthew Bright.
disturbing
Yeah,
to
it's a
see
weird movie.
Gary Oldman edited in a way that he looks like a little person.
Yeah.
And offensive.
Yeah.
That kind of sums up all of this guy's movies. So
He's got a style.
Yeah. So I highly recommend seeking out Freeway and Freeway 2.
Right
Alrighty.
on. So I quickly adjusted my number 1 because of Body Parts. Body Parts was my original number 1, but this one was kind of like waiting in the wings. And it's a film called Z-Ram. I don't know if anybody's seen Z-Ram, right? No one? It's from 1991. Yeah! There we go.
The Z-Ram fan.
So
Show
let's
off.
take you back to 1990,
I've never even heard of
1991. Little Ryan Turek in high school had no girlfriends, but he really liked anime, manga, the Guyver, anyone?
I remember Guyver.
Watched a lot of Akira. Called Japan a lot for model kits. I would call Japan and be like, "Hey guys, get that Godzilla versus Mothra model kit because I really want it." And then my dad would call and be like, "What is this $50 phone bill to Japan?" I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I was just ordering some model kits." So along this journey of calling Japan and buying Japanese magazines and stuff, I was introduced to Z-Ram. And Z-Ram is a horror sci-fi actioner that is about a bounty hunter who is tracking this alien that lands on Earth and threatens to devastate the entire planet unless she stops him. But what the creature does, he's like this big bulky dude. He's got like kind of a RoboCop visor. He's got a wide-brimmed hat thing that he wears, and then in the center of it is this like little Japanese lady's face, and it comes out like it comes out of his head like an alien mouth thing, and it like eats people. And it'll come out and punch you in the face, and then your head's devastated. But Z-Ram can do a lot of other things. He can ingest you, and you're kept alive for a little while you're inside him. He can spit out clones of himself, and these clones are very inferior, and they look like little maggot people, and they wander around and attack other people. But the gist of the movie is Iria, who is the bounty hunter, she tracks Z-Ram to Earth. She ropes in these 2 dopey engineers who get stuck in Z-Ram's alternate universe where she can do battle with him until she either wins or loses, and the fate of the planet is hanging in the balance.
I don't
lost
believe
Elric.
this is a
This
movie.
is a very
It's not a
complicated
movie.
movie.
So
It's
it
a big
spun.
guy.
It
Turek
spun.
wrote this up.
I did
in the
not. I did
bathroom.
not. It's pretty amazing. It's got a great score. I used to have the score. And they spun it off into a sequel, and there was an anime series. And yeah, it was a huge hit.
And
Wait,
yet
did
only
this-
one other person has seen anything to do with
Is
this
this
here.
on DVD
That's remarkable.
or is this
I
like?
can't say if you guys, I have not been
looking
able to
this
find it on DVD or Blu-ray. Yeah, look up Z-RAM. What's that? It is on DVD
is
now.
a-
Perfect. That's great.
There was a Z-RAM market. Somebody thought.
No, totally, absolutely. No, but it's a fun Terminator 2-esque kind of action movie with a lot of horror elements. There's a lot of gore. There's a bunch of scares. There's a moment in which Z-RAM is able to take his head off and he throws it and like it starts eating people. It's fucking amazing. Let me just tell you this thing.
He takes
So
the head off and the head eats people.
yes.
Okay.
So anyways, I'm going to blow, just want to blow your minds with a little Z-RAM. I wanted to give it a mention. Sam and I were texting. I was like, I'm dropping Z-RAM on you. And he was like, what? But it's definitely an acquired taste. If you guys are into movies like The Guyver, anybody? Yeah? Little Steve Wang,
Don't humor him. Just stop it, okay? This is going to get... We need more beer. Beer run at the back. Whoever's at the back, you're on charge. Yeah, you
But this whole topic was overlooked and unloved. So this movie was definitely overlooked, except for those who were at Chiller Theater with me buying the model kits for the one screening. But yeah, check it out. It's fucking weird. The special effects are very 90s, but very ambitious. It's overall just an ambitious movie. In the sequel, they like kicked it up a notch. It's insane. But it's the same scenario where these two dopey engineers get back in this like dimension, and they're like, "Oh, come on, guys! Didn't you learn the first time?" So, anyways, Z-RAM, check it out. Sam, follow it up with that.
I'm ready.
Z-RAM.
This was an interesting topic. I was talking to Ryan a bit about what it means to be sort of overlooked and unloved now, especially since we're living in a time with Arrow and Scream Factory and all this stuff, because 3 years ago, if you were like, what is the most overlooked horror movie of the 90s, I would have been like Tales from the Hood, 100%.
Yep.
It's a fucking great movie and never gets its due. And now it's out on Scream Factory, and I feel like that's not the case anymore, right? Like, people are appreciating it. So this is sort of in connection with that because it's just come out on Blu-ray. I feel like it's a film that's long, long overdue for love. It's called Dark Waters.
Oh, yeah.
Mariano Bino's film. And it's just, like, a transcendent movie. It's both nunsploitation and art horror, and it's this film where this girl goes to this mysterious convent on a mysterious island to find out what the hell, like, why is she being drawn there? And it's just a barrage of image, and I love that shit. Like, just give me nightmare images and nightmare logic and nonsense, and that's what this movie is. And I know you're a big fan of it.
Yeah,
as
it gets really Lovecraftian too.
super Lovecraftian. It's gorgeous. It's like a
Is
gorgeous
Severin
movie.
put that one out recently?
Yeah, like just last week.
Yeah,
and
I
you could
still
buy
haven't
it at
seen it.
their
I gotta get
booth.
it.
Yeah.
It's just really beautiful, and I think we're living in a time where a lot of people are like, art horror, and I'm like, this has been around forever, and it fucking rules, so please go watch it.
And when
It
you're saying
also-
art horror, you're talking about like The Witch and It Follows.
I
sort of
think
is
people
like,
have a little
oh,
chip on their shoulder
yeah.
about like slower movies, weirder movies that are like super beautiful but also super gnarly and strange. And I don't think it's a new thing.
Yeah.
It sort of never has been.
No.
And Dark Waters is a really great example of that, and it's a really great overlooked example of that. There's just like giant beach images with like fish,
Yes.
just dead fish, and you're like, what the fuck is that?
Well,
You
it's
thought
one of
Z-RAM
those
was weird. Come on.
How
dead
did he
fish. I
shoot
don't know
that?
how to do that.
Like I
Right?
see
Oh,
that
yeah.
shot, and I'm like, how did he shoot? Did he kill all those fish? I don't know how he did
I don't
that.
know. Ask Mariana.
No, and his stories about making it are absolutely crazy, but it is one of those movies that you will watch and then you will go, how the hell did he do that? Because even past the dead fish, because it is set on this like rocky island, but and it's at this convent, but
It's like jagged. It's a very like
it's
jarring, jagged.
And the convent goes down into the island, so huge amounts of the convent are with like these jagged walls inside this island, and it's amazing looking. And so to figure out like, you know, the location and how he did this, and plus he shot it, there was a couple of different countries involved, and I know that there was some war going on with one of the countries while he was shooting it, and so the stories behind how he made it and got some of the shots are epic.
And it's so like I haven't rewatched the Blu-ray yet. Like I have it at home. I haven't put it on yet. So a lot of what I'm going off of is I haven't seen this movie in years, but that's part of the reason I picked it is because I've seen this movie years ago and it's always sort of living right here. And if I'm remembering correctly, she's always looking through this like little hole in this like stone wall, and there's just this thing and it's pulsating. and it's like one of the most textured like images I've seen of something like that, where you're like, what the fuck is beyond that wall?
Do you
and you're like bothered by it.
Do you ever avoid rewatching that stuff? I mean, it's something we often discuss on the show, but like I know for me, if I get something in my head, especially art horror, things that are just different, I don't want to revisit it because sometimes I revisit it and I'm disappointed with it. But the thing in your memory that burns, that
it's
abstraction is
well, it's sort of also
exciting.
that great feeling of like, you know, when you watch something you're really tired and you just keep waking up during like the really gnarly parts. Like that's your vision of the
like
movie.
The Beyond. When we go to the Beyond at midnight,
oh
and
my God.
we're in. Oh my God!
And you sort of feel high because you're just like, oh, what's behind that wall?
I'll never know because I slept through.
But with Dark Water, there's also so much water imagery to the point, and it does things. That's the other crazy thing is you're like, did he actually direct water? Like, get it to do things for him? Because it feels like it. Like sometimes the water is slow
That has to be a
and
quote
flowing.
for the show.
Did he actually direct water? And sometimes the water is sharp, and sometimes it's got really jagged points, and it's like, how the fuck did he do
I think
that?
what you're speaking to, you know, like I hope he directed water, but I think what you're speaking to is like a quality that a lot of films strive for, but they never get, which the movie feels occult.
Yes.
Like it feels like there's some sort of like dark alchemy involved in this film, and that's why it affects you so deeply.
Yeah,
And it
and-
has affected me deeply for many years, and I can't wait to revisit it when I get home. But it's a really gnarly movie.
Yeah.
So Dark Waters.
Have you seen it, Elric?
No, I've never
I think
seen
it's
it.
right
Oh
up your
my
alley.
gosh.
I think
Yeah,
it's
literally
awesome.
walk across the hall and
tomorrow.
buy it
It's
tonight.
wonderful.
Well, yeah, and in truth, of all the people I followed on when you took over Shock for a while, I would always laugh because we were bi-coastal and we didn't really know each other, but I would always go, oh yeah, we have almost
Literally
the same
taste,
But occasionally there'll be one movie that you love and I go, oh yeah, I hate it, or vice versa. So it's kind of fun. We don't get to argue as much. Our show would be boring compared to me and Becca.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
To fight like cats and dogs. It's like,
We'd just be like, oh, did you ever see this
yes,
movie?
it's
Yeah,
great.
I like
Yes.
it. Cool.
I love that shot with the wallpaper and the dead fish. How'd they do the fish?
Oh, whoa. That's rad.
So many fish. I wonder if they directed water. Who knows?
For me, anyone that listens to the show, and even if you don't, I will tell you now, I have a soft spot for horror comedy. I don't know why, I just love it. I love regular horror, but I can't take horror seriously sometimes, and I just like over-the-top gore. I love the Evil Dead movies. I love Dead Alive, things in that vein. So I'm going to 1999, and I'm going
Told
to
you,
pick a little
99.
movie called Idle Hands.
Yes.
That's right.
Rodman.
And you know what?
choice.
I hope the director Rodman heard that applause because he really doesn't think that any of you guys like it for some reason. But it's a great little movie, and it came out in a really weird time because again, it was at the tail end of all the kind of Scream knockoffs, and it's a hard R movie. It's really goofy and funny about a bunch of stoners, and one of them is so I guess it's a spirit kind of inhabits his hand and takes it over, and it's because he's probably the most lazy human being on the planet, hence the easiest to take over. I think that's the gist of it. And then what follows is it's very much just Evil Dead 2, where the hand wants to kill people and actually is while he's asleep because he gets stoned and passed out, and then somebody gets murdered in town, and his hand went out and did it. But then it's really fun. Like Seth Green's in it, and what's the other guy who's Foggy on Daredevil now? I forget his name.
Oh, yeah. That's where he's from.
Yeah.
Oh, he's from
in
there.
there.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
What's his name? That's it, Eldon Henson. They're his best friends, and he accidentally kills them both. But very much like American Werewolf in London, they refuse to die. And like they even say, they're like, well, what happened? I was like, well, we saw his like white light, but dude, it was really far away. So we're just gonna chill here. And like they have like, half his head is falling off and stuff with a beer bottle in it. But it's really, really funny, and it's also a really good Halloween movie.
I was going to say, I remember it being like a really, not to use this word again, but like textured Halloween movie. Like you see
Very much
Halloween
so.
all over the place.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like when it's like late September, October, you feel like you want to watch a bunch of Halloween movies, and this is a great one. They even end up at a Halloween dance which is great because I kind of hate The Offspring, or at least
Oh
I
wait,
did
no.
at the time.
This is my only qualm with the movie. So the
Offspring.
Offspring are in it,
weirdly
covering an Afi song, and it's
Yeah.
like, you just get AFI.
It feels weird.
So yeah, The Offspring's in it, and they get killed by
Sam,
the hands.
I love that you know that detail.
Well, I was like, why can't you just
I
get
think-
AFI? Like,
I
put
thought-
AFI on. Like, no one knew who AFI was at the time. Everyone would see the movie and be like, oh, shit, AFI
I
is
thought they
tight.
wanted to cover a Ramones song and weren't allowed to. That might be the
probably.
hint of
Yeah.
it. But the point is, the movie. Here's why it didn't do well, because it was a really weird horror comedy that came out exactly when Columbine happened. And anything to do with a kid, even if he's a stoner with a possessed hand killing other teenage kids, was like, oh, you know,
we can't do that.
Yeah. So it didn't do well, but it's I watch it. I just revisited it last Halloween. I think it's such a blast, and it deserves. It doesn't have a special edition Blu-ray or anything, and it deserves a lot more credit. So.
What's the studio behind it? Do you remember?
I don't know off the top of my hand. Yeah. It might be like Paramount or Sony, one of the big ones.
And kind of a fun love story, too. Jessica Alba's really charming in it.
It's like her first
She's
movie.
like a proactive lead. She's
and
like
she's
always
great.
trying to help him out. And
a lot of people are like really fun in the movie. Like Vivica A. Fox is super fun in it, like hunting the hand.
And
there's
just,
like the neighbor who only listens to 80s metal.
Yeah.
And just totally random, and this is why I think this movie deserves a cult following, is because I became friends with Rodman, who made it, because he also did the classic Leprechaun 2, and I did the commentary with him for that. But we went to go see the Texas Chainsaw Massacre together, the 40th anniversary, and literally someone behind us in line was like, "Oh, I'm Leatherface," which is a quote from Idle Hands. So I thought that was kind of neat that somebody did Seth Green's Leatherface imitation while we were in line.
Awesome.
Well, I don't know. I kind of
second round.
When I was planning this, I thought at one stage we had discussed doing like ones that we thought we were having to fight to defend because they were marginalized. So half my list was those kind of titles, and then we went more for underrated. So I don't know. I've got good movies, but then I have movies. I'm going to go for a fun movie.
Just pick one.
Go fun.
All right, The Relic.
Holy shit!
You know,
I knew one of
The
you
Relic.
two.
We talked about this.
I fucking love The Relic.
Peter Hyams.
We joked about this literally on text. We were like, "Someone's going to bring The Relic to the table."
Look, listen, it's
I
no
didn't think it
mimic.
would be you.
I bet you guys thought it was going to be me.
I thought it was going to be
Because
Becca.
usually if it's a giant monster, I'm like, oh, I fucking love that monster.
I actually only chose it just to kind of fuck her over if I got it. I'm going to be honest. I don't even like the
did not pick
movie.
The Relic.
I just no.
Elric, this movie can be summed up with one scene:
yeah.
the no scene.
The no scene.
With do you remember this?
Yeah.
The SWAT guy gets pulled out.
Yeah.
Oh.
And all the shots in the museum. So who's seen The Relic? Do you guys remember this movie? I mean,
Holy
this is
shit.
a movie. Now I'm going to be honest. I haven't
on
seen it for a
Netflix.
long
Everybody's
time.
seen it.
How many people read the book?
There's a book.
Yeah.
1, 2. Yeah, the Relic is
know
based
there
on a
was a
book. It was a big hot property that was optioned by the studio, and then it became a very studio movie. The book is fucking awesome.
Who here has listened to the Tom Sizemore audio tape version? No? Yeah. Because I'm also lying to you.
I don't think I don't think he would get through that.
No, he probably wouldn't get there. But Tom Sizemore, this is like peak Tom Sizemore. This film is probably the last like big monster movie that I thought was super entertaining in the vein of Aliens and movies like that, because they just don't make big monster rampaging movies anymore. Splinter was maybe the only other one I can think of, which is pretty good.
But even that, they definitely kept, in Splinter, they kept the monster more kind of shadowed and not displayed like it is in Relic, where it's like, the monster has a name, it's like Kahoggoth or something like that.
Kathoga.
Yeah.
Kathoga, thank you.
It's a hypothalamus. It feasts on, I believe.
It feasts on your hypothalamus.
Yeah. And is it a Chicago? I can't remember.
It's in Chicago.
Museum.
Chicago
Yeah. The
natural.
museum seems the
Which,
size.
for some reason, it's a natural history museum, but for some reason, they're doing something on superstition.
Yeah.
It's totally weird.
I think the books is set in New York, and then they moved to Chicago. I wanted to be a PA on the movie so badly. I was like fresh out of film school, and I wrote to the production office and was like, "I really love the book, and I cannot be to be part of this film. Please take me."
I actually have no idea. Did it do well? Because I started in the theater. No, it didn't do well.
I don't think it did
See, to
well,
me,
no.
okay, this is a great thing about being a kid, or not a teenager, whatever it was, is you have no concept of that. This is a little bit pre-IMDb, I believe. So in my mind, The Relic's a big fucking success. So I watch this movie and go, oh, everyone's in the theater, and oh, it's a big monster, and oh, this is a good movie. And I walk out going, that was a hit. And I have no idea of the reality of the world. Just like I wanted Tommy Jarvis to become Jason. I'm like, after Friday Fight, oh, of course. So anyway, so I thought it was a really fun movie. I haven't seen it probably almost since then. But I was kind of pulling it as one no one talks about. Because also, I think Stan Winston did the effects, right? Hyams directed.
Wait a minute, did he?
Yeah.
My vague
I think it's a
memory.
Winston
Yeah,
monster.
but here's
He
my
made
vague memory of
Kahoggoth.
The Relic, and correct me if I'm wrong,
Yeah.
but I remember seeing The Relic in theaters, and because it's the Tom Sizemore one, and my beef with it is it's really terrible CGI from the very early stages of CGI.
Winston Crash
Like a
McCreary, who did a lot of the Jurassic Park illustrations. When you see the T-Rex from Jurassic Park, it's an artist named Crash McCreary, and he did a lot of art for the Relic. But it was Stan Winston's shop that put it together, and there were a lot of practical Kathoga creature stuff. But when like he starts climbing up the walls with his little suction feet, that's all like CGI.
So that's
atrocity.
my strong memory, and that's
yeah.
why at the time I preferred Mimic, because Mimic had come out shortly
Mimic's
after
awesome.
that,
Yeah.
and that one's not as great either. But of the two, I was like, oh, Relic, Mimic.
I bet if you rewatch
this
both,
Del
you would
Toro
go
guy's all
Relic.
right.
I would guess.
I don't know. I love Mira Sorvino.
But
The scene where they're
Hines-
rubbing insect organs on a subway. It's like, oh, we were
both
there.
better than Mothman.
Yeah.
But Himes is really good at shooting the film in the dark. There's a lot of scenes in like pitch darkness and just the creature being highlight. He also made 2010. He made Outland. He's like a really solid director. So it felt like if B movie that could have been like a Corman production done as an A-list movie. And I think I got to rewatch it myself before I recommend it to you, which I just did. That's me in a nutshell. I know I loved it as a young person. I thought it was a great movie, and I just wish there was more big monster movies. Even when they're dumb, there's something just fun about them. And I think that they are scary. I see why they're scary to approach. And funny that you said the thing about CGI. No, my memory is purely of seeing the monster and not CGI. So the memory of something, again, would change if I saw it tomorrow, I'm sure.
Sorry, just because I see a parallel here with like you talking about a B movie with like high-end production. I can imagine this happening to a movie from this year that in like 10 years, 15 years, everyone's like, this movie's tight, but it didn't do well. Life that came out like 2 months ago, the space horror movie.
Don't tell Ryan.
Really good.
So
I like
I
Life.
think you talked about it, but it's like mean, gnarly space horror movie with some really interesting deaths. Really fun.
Interesting cast.
Yeah.
You know, they brought a cast to the table,
And-
I think through favors, and the cast was like, sure, why not? We'll do this crazy
and
B
it's
movie.
like a rad movie, and I think like it's going to have the same fate where in like 10, 15 years, we're like, man, life is cool as shit. Like,
nice.
but yeah.
So for my next one, I went with one that I think is criminally underrated, and that is 1991's Lasetta, also known as The Devil's Daughter. Are you guys familiar with this one?
The Sect. Is
The
that
Sect.
the Sect?
Yeah, it's
Sect.
also known as The Sect.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Call it
rented
by the
it.
title we know, damn it.
I rented it under Devil's Daughter.
How many of
so
us do you think actually know what it is? But once we said the sect, we are like, this is our opportunity to
Yeah.
be like, yeah, we know that movie.
yeah, you stupid, Becky. Yeah, no.
I've all heard of Cemetery Man, right? Cemetery Man?
Yeah.
Yes.
So
All
this
right.
is
Same director.
Michelle Soavi, same director. He also did Stage Fright, which is absolutely beautiful if you've not seen Stage Fright. It's like an 80s giallo film it's just beautiful.
Are you the only person that pronounces it Giallo?
Giallo?
Giallo.
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 I'm not correcting you.
I don't know
It's
how
open
it's
to
actually-
interpretation.
Giallo?
Giallo.
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 Hard G. I like it.
I'm going with Jello.
Worst moments in podcasting, right there. Also, he was Dario Argento's assistant for many movies and literally learned from the maestros.
And so Dario produced this movie, and it's directed by the same guy who did Cemetery Man and Stage Fright, and so just a brilliant filmmaker. The movie itself is it's kind of a fever dream, so it definitely has more of like a stream of conscious feel to it, which it is very similar to a lot of Italian films in that manner. It's about a woman who accidentally hits this guy with her car, and she decides to take him home with her to make sure that he's okay. And once she gets him home, she realizes that there's something wrong. He's kind of obsessed. And then she realizes that that certain things in her life are getting weird. She keeps seeing the same people over and over. She finds this weird well in the basement of her house that she never even knew was there. And some beautiful imagery there where it's down this crazy tunnel. And she's like, I've never seen this before. And so a lot of the movie is built out of this imagery. And then the whole kind of thing is that she is pregnant with the devil's child, and that these people, this witch sect, is trying to get to her, and they have these keys, and they have 7 keys or a certain number of keys, and they have to insert them into somebody's face, remove the face, and then that becomes the keyhole through which they can like bring the devil back.
In other words, imagine it was called Mother of Tears, and that's the end of the trilogy of Argento, and it's much better.
Yeah,
just perfect ending.
It is so good. It is so beautiful. And if you're a fan of Italian cinema, this one was definitely late to the game. But if you're a fan of like Fulci and some of the slower Italian films, this is like right there with it. And it's fantastic and gorgeous and really difficult to come by. I remember seeing it on VHS when I was a kid. It just had this girl in blonde holding a snake was the VHS box
And
cover.
that was after The Church, right?
Mm-hmm.
And his career was kind of, he stepped away from his career after losing a child around there, and he was definitely on the trajectory to become the heir apparent to Lamberto Bava and Dario Argento in a lot of ways, and then he just had to step away from the industry. And I've heard he's coming back now, which is
He actually just did an Italian crime show
Cool.
Oh, really?
Yeah, through work stuff, I've seen some episodes.
yeah.
It's very normal detective stuff, but
Yeah.
it was really interesting to see an episode, and then it's
Yeah.
like directed
Getting
by
to see,
Michelle
like,
Southgate.
Is it still that stylish shooting
No,
style?
no. I mean, it's
No,
just a
very
different world
different.
that he's working in. but-
Yeah.
I'll check it out.
So that is
I remember he was talking
the
about
sect,
yeah.
a.k.a. Lucita, a.k.a. the Devil's Daughter.
Devil's Daughter. I just remember him.
You're only legit if you have 3 titles.
I know.
I just remember him going into press talking about trying to bring Cemetery Man back to a degree or something,
Oh, my
some
gosh.
way, and then working with Nick Cage. I remember
What?
that too. Yeah, he wanted to work
Really?
with Nick Cage on something.
Oh,
it was
that's
very
fun.
weird. Very weird. All right, so moving up into the 90s, I want to drop a film called Full Eclipse, which came out in 1993 by Anthony Hickox. Anyone? Full Eclipse? Thank
guy.
No,
Maybe.
not even you.
It's the same
All
plant
right,
that
but
you brought in earlier.
Thank you. So this was a movie that played often on HBO. It was an HBO original that hit at just the right time for me because I was reading comic books. I was drawing a lot. Yeah, he's in the. All right, someone way in the back.
Yeah, but he's
Thank
in
you.
the dark. He doesn't count. Come into the light, sir.
And it was just like one of those movies where my dad and I would like look at the HBO listings and go, "Oh, Full Eclipse, that sounds rad. Let's just tape it." And it played at like midnight, and I would watch it the next morning. And this is a little gem. Hickox did, of course. Yes, thank you.
You didn't tell me MVP's in it.
Dude, so MVP.
Mario
Let me
Van
get. Well, Bear,
Peebles.
don't hang on.
Whoa, he just
So
threw it out.
Hickox, let's put Hickox, who gave us Hellraiser 3
Yeah, I'm pulling
and
it up.
Waxworks, and pair him with Mario Van Peebles. And
Okay.
he plays an LA cop who is welcomed into a special task force led by Bruce Payne. Bruce Payne, 90s staple. And Patsy Kensit from Lethal Weapon 2 is part of the group. Paula Marshall from Hellraiser 3 is also part of this group. And basically what they do is they're a bunch of cops who take a special drug and then... You guys, what? Oh my God! So they take a special drug and then they fucking wolf out, and they become like not wolf men because they don't go full werewolf, but they basically are like Chris Claremont era X-Men Wolverine type guys.
Is this their like crime fighting strategy or?
Yes, they go after the worst drug dealers in LA. And they like swim through rivers and they like carry guns, but these claws come out of their knuckles like Wolverine.
So instead of getting SWAT gear, they decide to turn into werewolves.
Yes,
Whoa,
because why not?
You were
Becca?
just like, I love stream of conscious Italian movies.
I know.
Let this
but-
nonsense have its
Yeah,
day.
yeah,
Witches
but-
opening a gate to hell, police werewolves.
No, but I mean, like, yeah, what the hell? So basically, it's like taking a steroid. It's a whole like allegory for taking steroids. And when you take too much steroids, you get a little mentally unhinged. And if you take too much of this drug, then you might just go full werewolf. And the werewolf in this case is a
Full
giant,
werewolfing.
awful bear costume that Bruce Payne morphs into and must battle with MVP.
Oh, shit.
And this is a very, very special movie because you should be. It's a very, very special movie because it comes with all of like the Hickoxisms that we come to know and love from Hellraiser 3. So you've got high style, some ambitious action, some ambitious horror, women with really extreme eyebrows, and you never saw anything like this in the early 90s. Like it's who was it? Who was the filmmaker? Jonas who did Cub. Govertz, yeah. So I saw him like waxing poetic back this film. He like caught it and he's like, "Man, this is like an X-Men movie that never just slapped the X-Men brand on it." And I was like, "Yes," because I was refashioning my X-Men figures into these fucking things.
Oh my gosh.
I had my own MVP action figure. I was really into this movie. It was so awesome.
And was this the same period you didn't have a girlfriend, or was this like later?
Did she help you
'Cause I know
sculpt your
now you're
X-Men
good, but-
figures?
This did not happen. Yeah, no, there was no special lady in my high
Were
school
you trying to
life.
explain? I have a history of trying to explain Anthony Hickox movies to my girlfriend. I was trying to tell her about Hellraiser 3 recently, and just like this movie.
Well,
And she
luckily-
was like the entire time just like nope. And I was like, yeah, but he's like a CD Cenobite, and she's like nope. And I was like,
Yeah.
it's rad.
It's
It is.
HBO was doing some weird stuff in the early 90s. You know, we had Cast a Deadly Spell.
Hell yeah.
Which
we
is
had
great.
late 80s the Hitcher. So the Hitcher,
Would play all the time, yeah.
Cast a Deadly Spell, Full Eclipse are all HBO movies. So that's why we're not getting Blu-rays of these. We're not seeing proper. Well, there was a proper DVD release, but I'm trying to show Full Eclipse at Cinefamily in LA. And it's becoming very, very difficult. And I'm like, just fuck it, guys. I'm going to rent the theater, and I'm going to show you my DVD. and Josh Miller, who runs Friday Night Frights at Cinema, he's like, I've never heard of this. And I'm like, dude, X-Wolves on steroids. And he was all in. You can guarantee that there's a pretty intense and passionate sex scene with MVP and Patsy Kensit and go full wolf mode. You got Bruce Payne, who there's a moment in which he goes like this, and he goes, I could smell your fear. I'm trying to think of some other gems. There's some great stuff, guys. I mean, like even the costume design is completely borrowed from early 90s X-Men. It's insane.
You had me at Mario Van Peebles versus Werewolf.
Yeah.
What more do you need to sell this movie?
It's pretty incredible. Oh, yeah, you also got a great scene where he's in an air duct. There's an opening sequence in a nightclub where a bunch of assholes are holding a bunch of women hostage, and Mario Van Peebles climbs through an air duct, and then he kicks out the grate, and he's like, no! And he does this full John Woo slow jump down onto the dance floor while blasting people. It's amazing. It is amazing. I love this movie so much. You can get it on Amazon. Tell Amazon I sent you to get full Eclipse. It's only $12.
Wow, that was committed.
This has nothing. Speaking of Amazon, this has zero to do with the 90s, but Fade to Black now on Amazon Prime.
Yeah, Fade to Black on Amazon Prime.
My gosh.
Hey, Sam, can you get full Eclipse on Shudder so you can bestow?
Actually, do you have any idea how they could have pulled that off?
Because
Fade
there was
to Black
so many
had so many rights.
I
with
have
the
zero
music
idea
and
because
the
we tried.
movies.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Fade to Black it was a rights nightmare. It's one that's like it's well known
fun
for being
movie.
underrated because it's been stuck in like VHS hell. I think it did a limited DVD release briefly, but got really expensive, and it was never able to really get released past that because the character in it dresses up as characters from movies and then quotes lines and plays the soundtrack.
Which, like, that's fine, but there's constant, like, footage. Like,
He has flashbacks
footage.
to old
Yeah,
movies,
yeah.
so you'll see Creature from Black Lagoon.
And so it's like a licensing nightmare. So I know a number of companies had been trying for a long time to try to network it and figure it out, but none had been able to. So
It's on
Because it
Amazon
didn't
Prime.
do well.
Yeah.
It's hard
Yeah.
to fight for too much.
There's another movie I would maybe kill to put on Shudder, but unfortunately, I mean, it's not as interesting with rights. It's just like no one knows where they are. But Pin, A Plastic Nightmare.
Oh my gosh,
I'm
yeah.
a big fan.
A wonderful film.
Sam, you're right. That is a great film.
Hell yeah.
It's one of my favorites. I'm pinning. Sorry, I was pinning.
Is
guys.
that pinning?
It's
a
an inside
verb
pin.
now?
Penny Kane. It's my
Sam,
turn.
It's
go
your
for
turn,
it.
Sam, you're up.
Oh, you know what? I didn't come prepared with this film because I watched it on the plane. But I'm going to talk about it.
We're in.
Keep talking,
We have
son.
leaned in,
We're all
Trying
Sam.
to be
good.
inconspicuous about talking to the other members of the group.
Yeah.
Just talk openly.
Going
Let's
over.
just be open.
What do you got?
I was on the plane scrolling through what was available, and I saw a movie that I hadn't seen since I was a kid. It used to play on HBO all the time, came out around 95, 96, and I don't remember ever seeing it in full, but a lot of aspects of it frightened me, and it's not a scary movie. It's more of like a supernatural noir, a supernatural mystery. It's a period piece called Eve's Bayou.
Yeah,
And
it's a good movie.
Yeah.
really, really...
Horror?
It's very
supernatural.
debatable, but there is voodoo. There's hard supernatural
Yeah.
stuff in it. I think it's worth talking about.
It's an
So-
emotional film.
Yeah.
very
I
emotional
remember
film,
that.
but really good movie. And I was really excited to revisit it on the plane and really like kind of take it in. But it is this period piece set in the South, set in Louisiana, I imagine, because there's a lot of voodoo and a lot of Creole spoken, about a young girl coming of age, and her father, Samuel L. Jackson, is a town doctor. Everyone loves him. Finds out he's cheating, but her aunt has a psychic gift. There is another psychic in town. There's a lot of anguish. There's a lot of supernatural reckoning throughout her sort of tumultuous childhood. And it's like a really just like rich movie. Like you feel the Southern Gothic. The score is really good. It's really like twangy. The flashbacks are really stylized. These black and white when her Aunt Roselle does these readings. There's like these really cool black and white stylized of people sort of floating on the river while they're in their own, settings with which she's seeing them. So she's seeing some guy kind of shooting up and telling someone that's where your son is, but like he's on the river. There's like a folklore nature to it. So it's sort of like what American folk horror might be like. And you sort of wonder that since folk horror is such a inherently British thing. And like obviously The Witch is folk horror, but this kind of coming deep from within the South and voodoo and And it's just a really cool movie. It's a really emotional movie. The final shot is like a tremendous shot. It's just beautiful. It's gorgeous. It's a cool movie. I really liked revisiting it. And Samuel L. Jackson's amazing, and it's like really, it's always exciting to be reminded how good of an actor he is.
I was just reminded of the cool thing about our show when we do it in the studio, we don't hear walkouts. There's something really sad and harrowing about
Someone's
that
like,
sound.
I'm not rewatching
That's like someone.
Turn us off.
It's like someone unsubscribed from our feed.
Yeah. I'm not downloading that.
It's a live unsubscription. They're like, fuck these
It's because
guys.
I keep bringing it down. Ryan's like, wolf, Satan. And I'm like, Eve's Bayou. It's a very emotional film. It's very good.
We just want consistency, man.
I know, sorry. But it's a good movie.
I'm going to go with a very unpopular one where I will probably lose 90% of the people in this room, but I think Elric Kane is going to back me up.
Dude, I think I've written it down.
All right, hold on. Hear me out before you start throwing tomatoes, okay? I love franchises in general. Obviously, I'm going for a commercial movie here.
Oh,
Hold it, you. Hold it.
I think Elric has it on his list.
Here's the thing.
Wait.
Everybody wait. Here's the thing.
you-
I get in marathon mode just like all of you. Sometimes like a new movie's coming out, I was like, well, I got to watch them all in a row. And what happens is as you watch them consecutively, thank you, Mick, for bringing beer.
dude.
Holy shit.
It took an Australian.
You know what? I'm going to need this for what he's about to say.
Yeah, we all need to have.
Whatever, dude.
Thank
I'm
you
down.
so much.
Thank you, sir.
But
So we all need a drink before.
I'll take a drink when he reveals this shit title.
Not shit.
So when you watch a movie in order, obviously you get to a point where you're like, oh, this is a franchise getting terrible and terrible. But what I do now with remake sequels is I watch them completely out of context and pretend none of the other movies exist, and just is like, is this a fun movie? So Elric came over one Friday the 13th, and I was like, you know what? Fuck it, let's go for the unrated Jason Goes to Hell. And
Yeah.
and you know what?
The rest of you can leave.
You even said.
You guys are
Can
all
I walk
out of your
out?
minds.
Like, can I do that?
You can.
And it was. I mean,
Well, we watched the unrated
yes,
cut, which isn't what we saw in theaters, correct?
yes, that is correct.
And
That
it
is
was
absolutely
way
correct.
better.
Yes, and I mean, look, as a Friday the 13th movie, it doesn't succeed in continuing what you're used to from the Jason Voorhees saga. But if you look at it and pretend Jason doesn't exist, but like 80s slasher movies, the typical trope of them, like this movie starts with like a girl going to a cabin.
It's what the best opening of all the series, I think.
Yeah, it's
That's
a great
the one part
opening.
you can't argue. It's a great opening.
So it's like the traditional 80s slasher trope with a girl going to a cabin, blah, 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 and then Jason shows up and he's
She has
about
a shower.
to kill her.
She has the shower.
Does the
All
shower
that.
scene.
It's the first 10 minutes you have to have nudity and then the kill.
All of it. It
It's
hits
like-
all those checkpoints, and then a SWAT team shows up and blows Jason up.
No, she's in the shower, and then she does a dive roll
Right.
out, and you're suddenly
Because
like,
she's
oh, wait a minute, what am I watching? And she's an FBI agent. It's
Because she's FBI, and you're like,
so
what? And then they just blow Jason
Yeah.
apart. But
Imagine,
you know what?
imagine staking out Jason Voorhees.
I know. I love that.
I love that. It's so good.
You picture two cops there with their cups of coffee. What if they were the werewolf cops? I have made the
Oh.
greatest movie ever.
Cross-section.
Right there. Inception.
You just brought me back into the conversation. I think this is a terrific idea. Especially if you give the werewolf serum to Jason Voorhees. Then he's got
and then
fucking
it's
claws
werewolf
coming out.
Jason.
Oh.
Can he
Okay.
defeat the
Jason,
werewolf
it'll
cop?
still be better.
Oh,
It'll still be better than Jason Goes to Hell.
There.
Okay, so
Nice.
let's ignore that his name is Jason.
Yeah.
So FBI, a girl goes to.
It's
You
Jason.
cannot ignore it.
No argument.
It is,
Out of
it's called Jason
context.
Goes to Hell.
First of all, stop
I'm
talking
so-
over me, all of you, because I don't do that to any of you.
There you go.
That's number one. Number two, out of context. Every plot that you guys described tonight is the most ridiculous, insane shit I've ever fucking heard.
Yeah.
Okay, so shut up for 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Some girl goes to a camp, okay? She goes to a cabin. You're like, oh, she's going to shower. She's going to get slashed by some killer. The killer shows up. She's a fucking FBI agent, and they blow him apart. Then they take the remains of the body, and the coroner eats the heart of this killer.
Because he couldn't
and now
resist.
all of a sudden, he's
Crazy.
that killer. And this killer keeps vomiting this heart out into other people's bodies to keep this body because he wants his old body back. And then you got a lead character who's kind of, for lack of a better term, kind of like a nerd.
And he's
He's
from
like-
the Friday 13th TV
TV
show.
series.
So there's perfect integration of concept there.
And there's good comedy, and then, Creighton Duke has that wonderful line about a donut and a hot dog, which I still don't understand.
When I think about Jason, I think about a little girl with pigtails trying to put a hot dog through a donut hole. Out of nowhere in the story, and never explained. I think in a commentary he's just like, I don't know, it's hot as shit. That's what I imagine.
Out of context, great line.
Yeah, yes, a brilliant line.
So the point is, me and Elric watched it, and honestly, the unrated cut does make a world of difference.
The gore in that tent scene was amazing.
Because K&B did the effects for it,
Yeah.
and they did it, and it's some of the best work they've ever done, and it didn't end up on the R-rated cut. The unrated one, I think, is out of print now on DVD, but it's funny, that even the box set's out of print now. They did a Blu-ray box set, and the version of it on there is rated R, but if you... it comes with the digital downloads, and even though it says it's R, for some reason the version that's on digital is the unrated cut, so we could have watched it in HD instead of that DVD. But point being, we had a blast watching it, and no, it's not my favorite Friday the 13th movie, but considering the plot lines these guys have described to you all night, I don't think that plot I just said is very far off. So there.
And I think it's probably the best sequel to The Hidden I've seen.
It's better than The Hidden 2.
It's not a Jason movie. It's a Hidden sequel. If you haven't seen The Hidden, it's the exact same story.
I found a hidden vinyl in there.
Oh, really?
What?
Yeah.
Are you serious? Whoa.
It's a good thing I have it, Ryan.
I will guide you to it.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Guiding us.
Yeah,
I
got you.
vinyl.
Where do you go from there?
Well, no, I'm just proud that I wrote it down.
Lots of
You did?
places.
Oh, so you wrote it too?
I
wrote
wrote
down.
down a few titles because I thought we were gonna defend
I
things.
figure at the end we'll throw out some extras, so I have a few.
yeah.
extras.
I've got to say, well, no, look, we also watched Leatherface together one time, and we watched an unrated. How was that? Like, how were you watching some of those effects? Was it extra feature?
No,
Seeing-
the DVD release of it included both
The gore.
a unrated cut and an R-rated cut, although I think the unrated is as complete as it can be, although director Jeff Burr will still tell you there's tons missing.
Yeah.
The unrated, I think the difference is the little girl's involvement in the violence, because she's the
That's
one.
one.
she
that's a
pulls
plot
the
part.
But it's
There's
it's
a part
all
where somebody like does this and it just cuts, and then there's one where it goes and the blood
no,
everywhere.
it's all subtle. Like every kill sequence is much more graphic in the unrated.
You
It's
cannot.
cool.
I mean, we were talking about this on the Jason panel today. You just can't censor horror and expect that the movie's going to come out okay. Because you are changing the actual context of the stuff. That is a viscera, is a part of this genre, and it's an important part. It's not just that we shortened a few scenes. No, you've actually killed the point of the creation, and I felt that in Jason Goes to Hell. When I saw it in theaters, it kind of pissed me off, but I remember thinking, it's kind of a fun concept. Watching it with you, I really thought it was a fun movie, and I thought the actual kill scenes were astounding, and it really pisses me off when people fuck with horror. I'm sorry. It's just, especially MPA. Like, there should be censorship anyway.
Get mad,
It's
Elric.
No, it's ridiculous. Yeah,
we
I'm
talked
mad.
about the same thing in the brain damage
I'm
panel.
so mad I'm
about
going to
how
talk about Frighteners now. That's how mad I am.
Frighteners.
Yeah.
Is that underrated?
In New Zealand,
I think
a young
that's
man was
well-rated.
born called Peter Jackson.
Oh, this is why.
What happened to him?
Who would go on to make, I don't know, some shitty Hobbit movies. But once upon a time, this guy had an incredible sense of humor with his first three films, I think, are all brilliant and subversive and funny. I was going to do something really serious at the end of this and talk about The Kingdom, because I think Kingdom's one of the greatest things ever. And so because we have our friend Mr. Udo in the house today, you should watch The Kingdom. It's a brilliant, but it is it's a series, multiple episodes.
I wonder where you could watch it.
Oh, you can watch it on
Can
Shudder?
you watch that on
watch it on
Shudder?
Boom.
You can Udo Kier. When you meet Udo here, imagining him being birthed as a 45-year-old man through a woman. It is the craziest thing I've ever seen in my
Wait, what?
life. Yes, that's a scene in that
Kingdom.
movie.
The Kingdom is
The
incredible.
Kingdom is Lars von
8
Trier's
episodes of Von
It's
Trier
masterful.
unfiltered.
Now they made an American version of
Yes,
it,
but
Kingdom,
it's
Kingdom
Hospital.
Hospital, which
Put Stephen
it's-
Which
King's
does
name
not
on
have
it?
Udo
Ridiculous.
Kier.
yeah,
being
it does
birthed.
not.
No.
It needs some Udo Kier,
No.
but the original is just it's
Anyway.
spellbinding.
So anyway,
I'm
are
not
we
talking about
Are we talking
that.
about Kingdom or are we talking about Frighteners?
I'm not talking about
Frighteners.
that. Okay.
I got lost.
And you looked at me just when I said Frighteners with absolute disgust. So tell me what's the
No,
problem.
he's with you.
No, I'm with you.
I just don't like it.
No, yeah, but what did
How
you
do
like
you
about
not like
it?
It's just
Frighteners?
not my shit, man.
Yeah. I thought we were one, like a broken heart, Laura Palmer's heart that was spread across different places.
It's,
But the
I'm
one
Donna,
made-
you're Laura, we dance in the fields. It's just not my thing.
Okay.
No, I will say that Frighteners, now watching it, because I watched it just a couple months ago, it feels way more CG'd than it did when it
Because
first
it's awful.
came.
Yeah, no,
the CG is
CG,
terrible.
effects are
and
really
Yeah.
dumb.
it really pulled me out, like where the faces are coming out of the walls. When I was like in high school watching it, I was like, oh my god, this is so like
Yeah, you're right. I hate that
mind-meltingly
movie. Let's
scary.
pick another one. No, I'm not going to do that.
No, it needs-
Jeffrey Combs is so fun.
Yes.
In this, and I love Jeff Combs. Of all the people I've met in LA, we've met all these people that we've been doing interviews of and so forth forever. Jeff Combs is like, I think he's one of the coolest guys, but he's also a great actor. If you ever get a chance to see him play Edgar Allan Poe, literally blow your mind. You'll
He
be like,
gave my
you
parents
didn't think he could do
tickets
that.
to the show.
Yeah, he's
he invited me, and I said, "Oh, I can't come. My parents
he's
are in town."
top-notch.
So he gave them tickets too.
Top-notch actor who
love him.
hasn't really landed many roles that would tell you he's that good an actor. I'll tell you that. But I thought The Frighteners was one of the few where he's playing a crazy FBI agent. For those who don't know, Michael J. Fox, it basically can see ghosts, and it's caused him problems with it in his own relationships, and they kind of fuck with him. And it's a comedy. I mean, to me, it seems like it would be a Rob favorite when you're young. To me, but
I loved it because it's to me it's in that same vein as like kind of like Ghostbusters is.
Yeah.
No, it's in
where
that vein.
But I like that it gets really dark.
Yeah.
It's very lighthearted and kind of like, oh, this is kind of like a kid horror movie. But then that last third act when like Death himself comes down, not really, but it's supposed to be Death.
Well, because
Because
they
it's
correspond with
ultimately it's about serial killers who
serial
are
killers.
trying to get this number. Like they want to reach this particular number.
Yeah,
of
there's
killing
a
people.
serial killer who's alive, one who's dead, and they're both trying
Well,
to
and
hit
the other
a
great
toll.
performance is another woman who is here. Dee Wallace Stone is phenomenal in this.
Yeah.
Like I think she was totally. I don't think people were paying attention to how good she was
She's
in this.
great in
Totally
it.
hiding. Jake Busey's really good, but I think she's particularly strong in it. And they are trying to kill. What is the number they're trying to get to? They're
just trying
break
to
the
out.
number
Yeah, they're
of
just
kills.
trying. They hit a goal, and now they're just trying to outdo themselves.
And each person gets the
Like, they
victim's
get a
number is
carve,
carved into
yeah.
their head. I don't know. I feel this film was #1 that year, because this was when in New Zealand we didn't have any director, especially in genre, breaking through, and so everyone paid a lot of attention to what Peter Jackson was doing. And I remember when this film came out, the stat was, oh, it's #1 in Brazil, cool, but because it had tanked in America, but it had done pretty well in other places, and it still gave him enough leverage to get another film made, and that's the important part.
Now, what happened? Because the script was originally created as a Tales from the Crypt script, right?
There was, they were going to develop it as
Originally.
a Tales from the Crypt
Yeah.
Presents. Yeah.
And then it kind of spun off on its own.
Yeah, I think the producers who were involved were also part of the Tales from the Crypt family, and then when that just didn't happen, they just took it somewhere else.
Well, there's a pretty lengthy gap between Frighteners and Lord of the Rings. I think was the next thing he did
Yeah.
because he had a really tough time on it. And,
Big pitch.
And I remember, I don't know, I assume it's on the Blu-ray, but I remember my friend had the Laserdisc of it when it came out and had this very lengthy.
It was a 4-disc set.
Yeah, it's this documentary about all that stuff that you said was CG. Like they built it all practically, and none of it worked like at all. It's all in the documentary about it. So like they had no choice but to figure out other methods to do. And I think, I mean, that kind of explains Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit movies. Like it's just he's become so reliant on that because it's kind of surefire way to work. But I say, I also love Michael J. Fox.
Yeah,
I always
it's
thought
the last big role we got from him, really.
Yeah, and I think he's great in it.
Yeah.
The script, if you look at the script, it kind of meanders, but it's incredibly, it's not a tight movie because it rambles, but everything has connective tissue. Everything is tied together. Everything ties up at the end, and that's what I remember really appreciating about it. And let's not forget, not between Frighteners and Lord of the Rings, there was not a gap because he did Heavenly Creatures.
Yes.
Oh, you're
Oh,
right.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Heavenly Creatures is a masterpiece with Kate Winslet and
And he
Melanie
was actually
Linsky.
nominated for an Oscar for that, and that definitely comes under horror. It's true crime, it's
Yeah.
a true story. And
Yeah.
it's,
That's my shit.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, I knew you'd love that one. Two girls living literally in a dream world that they've created for themselves, and when something else forces to threaten to pull them apart, they eliminate the problem.
Well, and you look at that movie, and it forced after Frighteners, it forced them to go back and do something that is deeply emotional and personal. And
the weird thing is, I thought
creative.
that was before Frighteners.
No.
I thought that
That's so
got
too.
him Frighteners.
No.
Yeah.
You
That's
sure?
that's
Because
memory
in my
of it, too.
mind, that was his the thing that plateaued him and got him the gig.
No, I thought that
to
the
get
Frighteners
Frighteners.
script was floating around
Yeah.
before
Which
Heavenly Creatures.
Heavenly Creatures before Frighteners?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No shit.
Yeah, I guess we should listen to whoever's from New Zealand. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, well,
moving on.
Your stats on what is a big box office movie.
Hey, The
is
Relic was huge.
Relic's
Number
huge.
1 in Brazil.
Frighteners, man, what a big movie.
Remember, Elric tried to convince us at one time that Society was huge because it was
In New
huge
Zealand,
in
Society
New
was
Zealand.
big. It would be next to Reanimator, so I thought it was equally big. Sorry.
Yeah, we were like, that was the smaller release here, dude. So, for my
Becca?
next one, I actually wrote down 2 films from the same director, and I've been sitting here going back and forth which one to go over. So the director, this one? I figured
but do
you'd
both.
yell at me
Do
and
both.
say
No,
that
do
it
both.
wasn't horror.
Do both. They're both
okay,
cool.
so my director is Alex de la Iglesia, and I
Yes.
probably said his name wrong. So I love this guy. Like, most of what he's done, I absolutely love. Like, even his weird, math one with Elijah Wood that everybody's like, I don't know about that.
I never saw
I
that.
fucking love that film.
Oxford
Oxford
Murders?
Murders, yeah.
I love it. But most recently, the one that people know is Witching and Bitching is his.
Yes.
But he had 2 films during the 90s that I absolutely love. So I will do both and quickly go over them. So the first one has never been released to DVD here in the States. And it is criminal that this has never happened. And that's Day of the Beast. And
Great movie.
one of the best and funniest horror comedies you will ever see. It is about a priest who knows that Satan is coming, the Antichrist is coming, and he knows that in order to get as close as possible so that he can kill the Antichrist, he has to commit as many sins as he can to get close to the Antichrist. So the movie opens with him dropping this giant fucking crucifix on a nun, and then literally just going through the streets, pushing people over, pushing them into garbage cans. He just walks up and punches somebody, and he's just trying to sin as much as possible. And while he's doing all this, he hears this music playing and sees all these pentagrams in this window, and it's a record shop. And he meanders his way in and is talking to this like crazy metalhead who runs the record shop, and is like, he asks him, because he's very like not familiar with this world, and he goes like, do you know how to get close to Satan? And so the guy hands him all these satanic records. And so the priest is like, dude, this guy must know Satan. So then you've got a priest and a metalhead who are now teaming up against the Antichrist. But not being done there, they keep seeing ads. You see him from the beginning for this kind of Chris Angel-esque magician who's like, you know, I'm the real deal. I have the spirit. I can make you disappear. And so then they're both like, hey, this guy apparently has like magical powers. Let's get him. And so it becomes a Chris Angel-esque magician, a metalhead who runs a record shop, and a priest team up to fight Satan on New Year's Eve.
It's amazing.
It's
a great movie,
amazing.
yeah.
And it is one of my favorite films of all time, 1995. Has never been released to DVD in the U.S.
Yeah,
Just like
I
that
bought
one
my
Yeah.
copy in Mexico City.
Wow. I have it on
to.
VHS. And yeah.
I still have Michael Gingold's DVD copy.
Mike was our old managing editor at Fangoria, and he now writes for like everybody.
And I'm
He's
almost
everywhere.
surprised he's never been like, do you still have that?
So if you have not seen Day of the Beast, I cannot recommend it enough. The other one from Alex de la Iglesia that I'll go over is from 1997. So just 2 years after Day of the Beast was made in Spain. Perdita. I'm doing Perdita. So Day of the Beast was made in Spain. And after everybody saw this and was like, oh, this guy's really got something. This is a great horror film. Somebody said, let's let him make a big American movie, a big American horror movie. And so he decided to do Perdita Durango. And some people will know the idea of Perdita Durango because in David Lynch's Wild at Heart, the character Perdita Durango comes up briefly. She's played by Isabella Rossellini. And it's from the novel
Barry
Luna,
Gifford, who
Luna
co-wrote
and
Lost
Sailor.
Highway as well.
Yeah,
as
Luna
Wild
and
at Heart.
Sailor. And so Perdita Durango was this character. She'd been around for a while. If you actually read the Barry Gifford novel, she plays a much larger role. So Alex came over and said, you know what, for my first big American film, I want to tell the story of Perdita Durango. It's supposed to be a huge film, so he cast Rosie Perez, who was like fresh off Oscars at the time.
White Man Can't Jump.
Yeah, White Man Can't Jump. Like she was hot at the time. And the movie is about her, and she's dressed up in this like Tura Santana Faster Pussycat garb, and she's hanging out at the border between U.S. and Mexico, and she meets Javier Bardem.
In his first real American role. He'd been in
Yeah.
Almodovar films, but this was like an explosion of talent
Yes.
that no one was ready for.
And he
Terrifying
plays
characters.
a drug dealer, gangster, voodoo priest. And his voodoo was all done with Screamin' Jay Hawkins, who plays a role in the movie, although he later claimed he didn't remember shooting most of it. And then, so the whole thing is supposed to be about them pulling off this heist. And this is where it starts to get weird and uncomfortable, and part of the reason that it's never been released here. They then kidnap two teens who they like repeatedly rape throughout much of the movie. They also hijacked a truck full of human fetuses, which are being used to make makeup. And the whole movie just goes off the rails there. But at the same time, it's a comedy because every so often, Javier is a big fan of Herb Alpert. So occasionally, like, Mexican, what's the name of the song? Mexican Flea? Or Spanish Flea will come on the radio and he'll start dancing. And it's just bizarre because there's just so much tonally going on with this. So it's graphic, it's bizarre. There's these weird voodoo scenes in the middle. There are these teens that are being held hostage. It's uncomfortable but funny. And they did a very brief release. It did get a very small DVD release here under the name Dance with the Devil. And nobody saw it. And so it never got anything else. But
Alex de la Iglesias movies are like all messy and like it transcends the idea of like whether it works or not because they're all such like singular voices. He's the best.
Yeah. So it's one of those directors that I just feel like more people need to look at some of his work, and
his dark crime, like Commonwealth and Perfect Crime, are great.
Or he did The Baby's Room.
Room, which is part of 6 films to keep you awake. It's terrifying.
And it's like a straight horror where it's literally about a man and his wife who move into this house and they start seeing ghostly images on the baby monitor.
It's on Shudder.
And it's on Shudder. Oh, that movie scared the crap out of me the first time I saw it. It's like genuinely terrifying.
It's really
and it
terrific.
doesn't go quite as off the rails as a lot of his other films do, but still really tight.
And this would be a good double with No Country for Old Men, because Javier is really scary in No Country for Old Men that everyone's seen.
He's
but in
scary
Perdita, he's way more terrifying. I mean, it's a less predictable character in a sense, and it's hard to believe her, but between all the rape and fetuses, it's actually pretty funny.
It is. It's weird to say that this movie is somehow funny, and I mean, because it's appalling at the same time. It's generally like you're watching it going, oh my God, I can't believe they just did that. It's like if somebody made Last House on the Left as a comedy. It somehow works.
And there's a movie that I know Ryan has seen as well, and I want to compare it to early Alex de la Iglesia. I don't know how many of you regularly go to film festivals, but it's on the festival circuit. If you hear of a movie called Night of the Virgin, it's from Spain. It's
bonkers.
Insane.
It is nuts.
The sort of insane that you're hoping for. The sort of insane that like everyone in this room, that we all look for, that we all go, I haven't seen something this gonzo, this bloody, this weird, this gnarly.
What's it called again?
Night of the Virgin.
Night of the Virgin. It's basically
and it works. It is all of those things with good production value and just shit you have never seen before.
If I'm sure you've all seen Devil's Backbone. Mm-hmm. So there was a character in it named Owl, I think his name was. He had like the kind of big spectacles or something like that.
Yeah.
So he's all grown up now. And in the film, he plays a virgin who goes to a nightclub on New Year's Eve and hopes to score, and he finds an older woman who takes him back home, but she's got other plans for him. And her boyfriend shows up. And it's 2 hours of just pure insanity.
Yeah.
It's insane, and the third act just goes
sort of like indescribable.
Real gross out gags. My qualm with it is it's 2 hours. So, you easily could shave 30 minutes from it and have a really lean, insane film. But once it gets out there, we'll keep you looped in as to when it comes to the
just
US.
Keep it on your mind.
Or when Shudder gets
Please keep it on your mind.
Yeah. So my final selection, yes, honey, I want to add Wishmaster to this. But I just waxed poetic about Wishmaster 3 episodes ago because I bought the 4-disc box set and I'm still getting through 4. But Wishmaster's pretty dope. I want to add a movie that everybody knows about, but I feel is totally unloved, and that's 1999 Stir of Echoes.
1999. Yeah. I'm going to prove that in a moment.
That's my final pick.
Yeah.
Stir of Echoes,
Rob, you picked it too?
Yeah, I've been batting around what I wanted it to be, but I thought about it. I was like, that would be my final
Stir of
pick.
Echoes, it came out like months after The Sixth Sense came out, and I think everybody still had their M. Night Shyamalan glasses on, where they were like, it's the most amazing movie. But David Koepp's quiet little ghost story, adapted from a Richard Matheson novel, it just works. It is very scary. It's a story that is incredibly familiar now. I mean, it's just like, guy can see a ghost. The ghost is trying to tell him to do something. He's following it. His family doesn't know what's going on. But when it came out in 99, it was a supernatural thriller that really worked. And Kevin Bacon plays a working class dad in Chicago who moves into a home, and he starts to see these images of a teenage girl who had been killed, and he just kind of goes off on this mission to figure out why she was killed. And the mystery lies within the very walls and foundation of his house. So, at first he's like tearing down the walls, and then he's like, nope, it's not in the walls, it's in the basement, and starts just drilling into the basement foundation. And there's a little bit of like a connection to his son who also has abilities. And they played that up in the trailers, and I think that's what steered everybody away from it, because they were like, oh, great, Sixth Sense 2. But to me, it just really worked on a writing level and a performance level. I've never seen a working class dad be portrayed in such a very natural way as it did in Kevin Bacon's character. He did a really, really great job of it. Mm-hmm. He's just a dude that just like cuts wire. He's the guy hanging off, like getting your phones installed and stuff. But David Koepp at the time, he was a writer who was known for big blockbuster movies. He wrote The Lost World. He was involved in
Mission Impossible.
Mission Impossible.
Brian De Palma masterpiece.
Yeah.
I love that movie. I'm not
I
joking.
do too. No, I do too.
I just want to be clear.
No, and that's a very. I mean, like if you look at Mission Impossible and the script, it's a very sophisticated movie. It's fucking like woo. But Kep was known for the big blockbuster stuff, so it was great to just see him turn around and do something a little more insular, scary, classical. It's well shot, and who's the actress? New York actress, the one who hypnotizes him.
I know. She's
on
Love
Ileana Douglas. Ileana Douglas. Thank you.
I remember those hypnotism scenes being so just tense and it's so smart. Like instead of the ghost just like being like, I'm here. Like instead of it just whispering messages.
There's a moment where she grabs him and she grabs his skin. She grabs his arm and his entire arm goes pale and you see these veins creeping up his arm because she's literally pulling him into her realm.
But I remember the theater scenes because when he's hypnotized,
he
will wake up in a massive, grandiose theater by himself, and then the whole thing of how he would realize the messages.
Towards the screen.
He would be floating towards the screen, and what was on the screen would be blurry, and it would slowly come into focus as a word. Yeah. And it was always like, oh my God, what is it? What is it? And there was like a scare every time, but it was so well done.
It's really well thought out. Really, really well thought out. If you guys have never seen a film called The Trigger Effect, David Koepp did that a couple years prior. It's a really not necessarily a successful movie in terms of the themes it's trying to get across, but it's an interesting film. I think Bill Pullman is in it. But check that out. And if you haven't seen Stir of Echoes, check that out as well.
Definitely.
Yeah, that was my final pick mainly because it's so funny because I saw a test screening of it a few months before Sixth Sense and knew nothing about it other than, hey, it's called Stir of Echoes. It stars Kevin Bacon. I remember seeing it. I was like, this movie's going to be fucking huge. Like, that's all I kept thinking. I was like, this is a great little, like, commercial horror movie that's going to play to everybody. And then the Sixth Sense just completely changed it.
Devastated it.
And I remember thinking, like,
oh,
man.
Yeah.
So I think it's that underrated gem from that era that people should discover now.
And I haven't seen The Sixth Sense since its opening night, and I think that's a testament to my connection to the film. But I've seen Stir of Echoes many, many times. I don't know what it is. I almost say, Night is going to kill me for this, but I actually think Stir of Echoes is the stronger film.
There's a nice Blu-ray out of it.
I disagree with that.
All right.
Sam.
All right.
Final pick.
I've been racking my mind this whole time, switching up answers. This one's for Elric.
All right.
It's a New Zealand film called The Ugly.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
1997, Scott Reynolds.
Yeah.
Such an interesting serial killer film that exists in a real weird spot. Did it ever come out here?
Yeah. It was a direct-to-video release.
Oh, so it was a direct-to-video release here, 97. It's so interesting to watch now because it exists sort of in this world where it's ahead of its time and past its prime. It's sort of pulling from like the 90s noir serial killer thing that we had seen, but also I swear to God, it is pre-Saw in a lot of ways. Like the look of it, the texture, like the green, and it's sort of, it's just it's all based on this one interrogation of the serial killer, and he's sort of messing with the interrogator. Yes. And pulling visions and maybe telling her the truth and maybe not, and it's grisly and it's weird, and it's a film that is really worth discovering. What was your memory of it?
It was actually
was it a hit? Was it a big hit?
It was a big hit there.
Was it a hit? Was it a real hit or an Elric hit?
Really?
It was a New Zealand hit.
Yeah.
We made 3 films that year. I don't know. What do you want? The other 2 were animated. Fuck it. I don't know. No, but Paolo Rotunda, the actor in the lead role, is incredible. And he's actually become a director in New Zealand now. Really nice guy. The director, Scott Reynolds, made about 3 other films. And this is the thing when you deal with studios. He made a film.
He made a film after that got
a very
mangled.
interesting film called Heaven.
Yeah.
But it didn't really get mangled. What happened is it got to Miramax, and
that's what I mean.
And it has a transsexual lead character in it that apparently pissed off Harvey Weinstein, so much that he said it will be shelved and never seen. And so this was a film, and I saw it, and I was like, "Oh, this is a fucking good movie." It
Heaven
could
is
have been
awesome.
the guy.
I think there's a DVD of Heaven.
Yeah, it could
you
have been his
should seek out.
breakthrough
Yeah.
into making bigger American films, but instead, because one guy just was like, "Yeah, I don't like it. I'm putting it on a shelf." And so there's different levels of censorship. There's MPAA censorship, but then there's like Perdita Durango and the movie we're talking about now, where a studio goes, "You know what? We don't like how it turned out. We're not even going to do anything to it because it costs more to promote it," and they just stick it on a shelf. That's criminal shit to me, because some artists have gotten together and they've made something. They've created something for people to see. I mean, it's criminal as a film lover, is what I mean. Mr. Ryan laughing at my. But no, I really do think so. I think he's got a talent. He's a talented visual director. He made a film afterwards. I can't remember the sheep. Something. Yeah, it's a thriller in Australia, and it was pretty solid. But that hurts your career when
it does.
studios
And The
shut
Ugly
you
is
down.
it's such a cool movie. Like, it's a cool serial killer, but not straight crime, not
And
grit.
he would like it because of the mother's side.
Well, no,
a lot of psycho.
I love
of.
this movie,
Yeah.
and what I remember about it, what stands out is I was reading about it in the pages of Fangoria, and it was the only horror movie that era that had black blood.
Yeah.
Oh.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
the blood wasn't red,
Yeah.
and it was just such a strange, like, stark visual that I was like, I'd never seen black blood before, because the killer usually slices people's throats, and so he has visions of his victims, and they all have like this.
Oh,
black,
that's the other thing. It's like
Yeah.
ahead of its
Like-
time with like that sort of ghostly vision of
Yeah.
like the black eye and things like that, but it works there.
Yeah. So I remember that sticking out to me, seeing that image of just a bunch of ghosts with like black blood, and I'm like, I need to see that movie.
It's
And
a
it is.
cool-
It's a super cool little movie.
Super
Yeah.
cool movie.
I think there's a DVD of it.
There is, okay, good. It's absolutely worth seeking out. I only saw it very recently, probably in the last 2 years, because of Mitch Davis, who's the director of the Fantasia International Film Festival in Montreal. If you're ever thinking like, I want to go to Montreal, and what's a reason to go to Fantasia and
Fantasia's
see Montreal.
awesome.
Montreal's a great city, but like, here's the thing to do. Fantasia's one of the great genre festivals.
It runs for 2 full weeks.
Yeah, it's like crazy long. It's full of amazing
3. Is it
horror
3?
horror films and fantasy films and science fiction films and thrillers and all that stuff. It's a really cool festival, and Mitch is one of the people I look up to as like who to find movies from. And Mitch was speaking about The Ugly very recently within the last 2 years, and that's how I finally came around to
That's
it.
why we love Mitch. I love
Yeah,
him.
he's the man. Mitch rules. He's one of the most enthusiastic people I've ever met in my life.
So that's the 90s.
Well,
Yeah.
I
Oh wait, no, we got Rob.
No,
Rob, you want to cap
because
off with
Do you have
another
another
one?
one?
No, because I was thinking Frighteners, and you picked it, and then I was thinking Surf Echoes, and we both
have
of us
one.
were thinking of Urban Legend, but the honest truth, Sam, is I like Urban Legend 2 better.
Get
and,
the
and now
holy
it came out.
Urban Legend 2.
We'll take Urban Legend 2 out of context, and it works.
You know what? It totally does. So thanks, Ryan.
Well, I'm going to now
love Urban
read off
Legends.
1999, because as we were researching this, I
Oh,
kind of just
no.
went through each year, and I was like, oh, okay, well, that came out in 1996, and I was
Well,
like,
what also made your list?
on the other ones that I didn't discuss, Baby's Blood or Baby's
Oh, I had
Blood.
Baby Blood on my
The
original
French
list.
film
Ooh,
is
it's so good.
epic, and
a
especially
cool movie.
I would never endorse seeing the American dubbed version, except in this case because
Gary
Baby
Oldman.
Blood, it's Gary Oldman. Baby Blood, it's singular, is about a circus performer who gets pregnant, but her husband's really abusive, so she runs away. But then she realizes that what she is pregnant with is a parasitic alien that she has to feed blood to. But it talks to her.
Yeah, and they develop this like buddy relationship.
Yeah,
It's
she's
amazing.
like, yeah, I want to help you because you're kind of cool, and it like starts to learn about humanity through her, but she has to kill people to keep it alive.
Yeah.
And
a
it's
better version
Yeah.
of the
What-
Prevenge.
I was going to say,
Yeah.
it sounds
Hey.
like Revenge.
I know,
Yeah.
sorry.
Hey.
It's a Shudder title.
No,
Sorry.
but
Hey.
the best part about it, and again, it's awesome in the French subtitled version, but the parasite is very curious about humanity, and it's very poetic, and it talks to her, and it philosophizes with her. And in the American one, the parasite is played by Gary Oldman.
Yeah.
And that is worth watching the dub.
Yeah,
right
and the
there.
opening is on. I watched the opening weirdly a lot. It's just like this 2-minute scene, and it's just like negative space and weird colors and like waves crashing,
The
and the
ocean,
parasite just
cosmos,
talking.
and yeah.
And
Yep.
he's just like, and I mean, like,
She has
I
that great
can't-
gap between her teeth.
Yeah,
I always
it's-
love
oh
that.
yeah.
Just a weird
We
thing.
went
So
from
you guys- so you
the
got
opening
the,
scene to like, man, what a
got the-
babe with
Yeah,
the
what a
tooth gap.
babe with the pregnant and the blood and
Gap.
man.
Gap in her teeth. Anthony Hickok's babe eyebrows.
I also wrote down another highly underrated serial killer film, which I've talked about on the show before, Lighthouse, aka Dead of
Lighthouse
Night.
is very cool.
I love that one.
You're
1996.
getting snaps over there.
I
You're
got
getting
snaps. Hell yeah.
The 90s snaps.
Yeah, so 1996, Lighthouse or Dead of Night. It is about a prison ship that is transporting some prisoners, one of whom is a very violent serial killer known as a headhunter. The prison ship crashes onto some rocks, and everybody who was aboard the ship, the guards, the nurse, the other prisoners, all have to take refuge on this lighthouse island, where there's 2 lighthouse keepers. And so all of these survivors wash up, and then they realize, holy crap, the headhunter's with us. And so he starts picking off people on the island. And so, like, the guards and the prisoners have to kind of team up to try to fight him. And it's really awesome.
It's fun.
Because you got the ocean, and the only light is the lighthouse. And it's really good.
All right, guys, thank you so much for coming out for
Yeah,
our live episode.
And
so
you guys
much.
rule. Thank you for tuning in to episode number 50 of Shockwaves. On behalf of the whole Shockwaves crew, we just wanted to take a minute to thank the Texas Frightmare Weekend for having us. Thank you, Lloyd Cryer. Thank you, Bradley Harding. Thanks to the whole staff and crew there for doing such an excellent job and making sure we had a great weekend. Also, special thanks to our sponsor, Shudder, and in particular, Sam Zimmerman for joining us for the live podcast. And since this is episode 50, I wanted to give you guys a little something special. We haven't brought this up since the very beginning, but occasionally we get asked about the opening theme music to Shockwaves. That was composed by Blumhouse.com editor Gregory Burkhart under the moniker of Corvo. And as a special added bonus, we're going to play the entire track for you. It's actually a 6-minute track titled, hopefully I'll get this right, Fantomotique. I think I said that correctly. But anyway, what better way to close out episode 50 than with giving you the full version of this Corvo song. Thanks for your support.
watching a movie, and then suddenly we're acting in it.
Today's episode of Shockwaves is sponsored by Shudder, the premium streaming video service devoted to horror, thrillers, and suspense. Backed by AMC Networks, Shudder has a growing and dynamic selection of thrilling premieres, originals, and exclusives, including pregnancy horror comedy Prevenge, the Ring vs. the Grudge franchise mashup Sadako vs. Kayako, and We Are the Flesh. This week's Shudder highlight is Jordskot, a 10-episode folk horror series declared, by Dread Central, the kind of mystery show you wish were made more often. When Eva, a policewoman, returns to her hometown several years after her daughter's disappearance, she quickly begins investigating a new wave of vanishing children. As her search draws her deep into the forest, she realizes there are supernatural secrets in the town, and if she exposes them, it could make someone or something very angry. Stream the series called A Borgian and Stranger Things mashup by the Toronto Star now exclusively on Shudder. Shudder is available for the web, iOS, Android, Chromecast, Apple TV, and Roku for $4.99 a month or $49.99 with an annual membership. But Shockwaves listeners get a free month by entering the promo code SHOCK at checkout. Go to Shudder.com today and find the best collection of horror available to stream anywhere.